Welcome, everybody, to another Bangers and Classics podcast with me, James Ruppert, and him, David Malloy. And whereabouts are we this week, David?
Oh, we are in a special place, James. We are at Kenny's annual Classic Car Picture Show competition venue. Specifically, we've managed to sneak our way into the food and drink hall. Leave me alone. Some guy was after your volleyballs there, James.
All right.
Yeah, just not acceptable, you know. Keep your hands off James' volleyballs. Right, so that's it. So that's where we are. And, of course, Kenny's been very generous with his provision of food and drink, hasn't he?
Oh, no, he's done very, very well. Yeah, very much appreciated.
What shall we start off with? A couple of car spots for you.
Yeah.
One of which our old friend Gavin Braithwaite-Smith would like. Saw this the other day parked up in quite a nice place. On the road, so it's being used. I think it was somebody visiting somebody else. It was a Peugeot 306 Cabriolet in very good condition. It was green with a contrasting hardtop, a sort of russet-coloured hardtop. Now, I've never seen one with that sort of colour combination before, so I presume it's just been a case of, oh, there's a hardtop, I'll buy it and get it sprayed later. So that was one. And then, this is more your sort of scene, I think. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Driving along the road the same day, I was passed by an Escort Mark III van, 82 or 83, judging by the registration number. And it looked in very, very good condition indeed. It's almost certainly been restored.
Yeah.
And, you know, it took me back to the time when you'd see those everywhere. They were all over the place. But they're such a rare sight nowadays. But just for a few seconds, you know, now was then. It was good.
Yeah.
Excellent. So that was the car spots for me this week.
Yeah. No, not a great deal at this end. There was a Mini, and strange enough, I wasn't in one of my Minis. Otherwise, there would have been some furious waving going on. But it was a Mini. It was a very early '90s one, but the bloke had gone for it by sticking on arches. They were wide arches, so they were proper old fashioned glued on ones. There was nothing subtle about it. It was no, it wasn't done in the best possible taste. It was actually done in the worst possible excess of the '70s and '80s, which made it so wonderful.
Right.
And he was going for it on the A road, obviously because I was in an old BMW, couldn't care less about me. So it was a shame that I wasn't out in the Mini, because the number of times I've seen someone in a Mini when I've been in my Mini in the last few years has been virtually zero. So it would have been a good time. But never mind. Yep, someone using his Mini in the middle of winter and going for it on an A road. So well done to him.
I wonder how he would react, if at all, if you'd been in the Innocenti rather than the BMW. I mean, would he realise that under the skin it's his car, basically?
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. I don't know. Some people are very well aware of what an Innocenti is, although the majority certainly aren't. I'd like to think somebody, if they're into Minis and they're running a Mini, would be very au fait with it. But it is one of those things where you do have to adjust your vision, in that you do think Fiat. Oh, no, it might be an Innocenti. But yeah, most people think it's Italian, but very, very few realise it's a Mini. But I'm sure he would have done. I'm sure he was on our side. I'm sure he's a listener, David. I'm sure he'll probably write in.
Absolutely. Now, to all these people whose cars we've seen this week, I've got this to say. Take yourselves to a car show next year down near where Kenny lives, and you could be in the show next year. And that's a big thing. To be picked by Kenny is a huge accolade.
It is, absolutely. I mean, we're just coming up to the weekend of the year, pretty much, isn't it, really?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, if Santa wasn't busy, he'd be here as well, I'm quite sure.
Yeah, well, he's got a lot to do, isn't he? But
he has. But we'll come back to him. We'll come back to him later, because
okay.
Obviously, as you know, he's been in touch with us lately, which was nice of him. Remember, I told you about the wall snob.
Oh right, yes.
Yes. Well, did I ever tell you about the time he bought a brand new BMW?
Go on.
It was I think it was an X6 or something, and he took it away from the garage, went onto the motorway, it's just close to a motorway, and floored it. And he was doing 30 miles an hour. He couldn't get to go above 30 miles an hour. So he pulled over, phoned the garage, and explained the situation. He said, "Look, I've just bought this brand new X6 from you. Taken it onto the motorway, I put the foot to the floor, and I can't get it to go past 30 miles an hour." The salesman said, "Well, can I ask you, sir, what gear are you in?" He said, "Jeans, t-shirt, and trainers, but does that matter?" Yes. It's possibly not a true story, but it should be.
Yeah,
So, just on that base, I'm going to keep it there.
fair enough.
Yeah, it's the only one I can get away with these days. Most of my jokes would be banned for one reason or another.
Well, I mean, I actually thought you were going to do some stand up at Kenny's show, but there you go.
I will be, but that's only when he wants to empty it.
Oh, okay.
Going home times, how to get rid of the punters, get me on the
Oh,
stage.
fair enough. Okay.
Yeah, I noticed you didn't disagree with that notion either.
No, I didn't. Not at all. No,
Shocking.
no, you told me some of the worst jokes I've ever heard, David. They're, quite, quite,
I'm
quite
quite proud of
scarring.
that.
Yeah, yeah, quite. Yeah, I'm scarred by your jokes. Actually, really, they come back to haunt me.
Global warming
Yeah,
will hide the scars.
yeah, good.
Going back to minis, though,
Oh yes,
you've got something to tell us, haven't you,
have I?
about not only a Hammer horror actress, but a Bond girl?
Yeah, strangely enough. And again, we have to say thank you to Kenny for supplying the actual video footage of this to us through his big High Kenny's organisation. But there's a lady called Caroline Munro who may mean something to you, or maybe not. But if you like Hammer horrors, if you like, let me see, James Bond, if you like the some adverts, Navy Rum
Mm.
was one of them. Um, you would recognize her immediately. And she does introductions to horror films on Talking Pictures TV. And she's very, very good at that. But she does invite readers or viewers questions. And so I thought, oh, I'll ask her a question. And I got a response, incredibly. Obviously, I missed it when it was on, but Kenny catches everything that's going on. So he very kindly sent me an old-fashioned Betamax tape that I could use. And yes, she answered my question. She used my name, and what we found out was is that she's a very big Mini fan, which was fantastic. Her first car was a Mini 1000. Which she got with her first paycheck in 1967, and she went on to own Mini Coopers, and she's a very big fan of the Mini. So I have extended the hand of friendship, David, by saying to her that if she wants to have a go in our Bangers and Classics Mini Cooper, she's very, very welcome. Whether anything will come of that, I don't know. But it was very nice. She seems like a very pleasant lady. Lots and lots of stories. She's owned lots and lots of cars. And she's basically one of us. She's a Bangers and Classics fan. So we'll have to
Very,
get her on the podcast.
yeah, I thought she was quite self-effacing too.
Yeah, she was. She's
Yeah,
great.
very, very down to earth. Yes.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you and I are an age where we instantly know who that was.
Yes.
But if you don't, please check her out. IMDb is a place to go, or Wikipedia. Check out some of the films too; they're great, and she's great
Yeah.
in them.
Mm.
And you'll enjoy it. And obviously, check out Talking Pictures TV because it's a free resource. There's lots of
Mm.
old films on it, and they're hosted by pleasant people like Caroline. So
There you go.
what's to lose? Changing gear slightly.
All right.
There's something else that has been in the media lately, and I believe we've both seen it. I know you've seen it. You must have seen it because I sent it to you.
Yeah.
It's a video from France
Mm.
by a chap called Remy Gaillard. Now, if you don't know who Remy Gaillard is, basically, where have you been the last 15 years or so? He is a French comedian slash prankster. There's no requirement for language in his videos because basically there's no dialogue. It's just Remy pulling lots of pranks, driving around dressed as Mario in a car in public roads and in supermarkets, all that sort of thing. Well, he excelled himself in this one. He put up a drone with a powerful light on it, managed to get in some of France's top TV stations. On the basis that is there a UFO in the area? This light keeps being seen every night at this time down near Montpellier, which is where he lives. And yes, Remy was indeed flying a drone. It was all a bit of a hoax. But he went further. He had a UFO built for him. And it's quite a good model. It's small, but it's pretty good. And he dressed up as an alien and put himself in various positions and surprised members of the public. You have to see it. It's very funny. If you look for Remy Gaillard UFO, it's on YouTube. He's on Twitter. He's absolutely fantastic. Would you agree with that assessment, James?
I would, David. I mean, he's obviously a very close friend of yours because you do like his videos. But I would say I would defy anybody who came across him in real life. It's a bit like the prank TV show that was on years ago, which I can't remember the name of.
Oh, Trigger Happy TV.
No, no, not trigger happy. I'm going way back to the 1960s, and I can't. And I
Candid
can't remember.
camera.
Candid camera. There you go. And one of the most famous ones was the chap coasting into a garage. And wanting to check the engine over, and obviously there was no engine in it, so the bloke is baffled as to how it got there. But the basic premise is that if you were in that situation, if you saw a crashed UFO, which is basically what you see in that, you would be taken in completely and utterly. You really would. You wouldn't think anybody would go to that bother, would you? You would be discombobulated anyway. So you wouldn't. If you watch it, you go, "Oh, how could someone fall for that?" Well, actually, I think all of us, 99% of us, would fall for that. Immediately because it's so well done. And
And there are cars in it. There are cars in it
yeah,
too.
there is. Yeah,
There's a sequence which I won't spoil too much, but suffice to say, he replicates a crash on the road, a
yeah,
shunt between a car, which obviously has got him a scrapyard by the look of it,
yeah,
and his UFO. And it's hilarious. It's absolutely priceless.
yeah,
And the reactions of the people watching it are priceless too. I suspect the impact of it is slightly lessened in that area because people think, hang on, that's got to be Remy because he is very famous there, and
yeah.
justifiably so. He comes up
Absolutely,
with some great stunts and great, very original stunts too. And he
extremely
keeps
original. He brings joy into our lives, David.
he does, yeah. He makes
Mm,
people laugh,
mm.
and we're all in favour of that.
Yeah,
And I think since we've hit a positive note there,
yeah,
let's take a break.
fantastic.
This is the Bangers and Classics podcast, presented by the host with the most, James Ruppert, and the pest in the West, David Malloy. And we are back after a slightly elongated break, while James just drank a vat of mulled wine and had a few canapes. As he's now relaxing in his deck chair. So while he's doing that, I'll just introduce this week's banger or classic. It's not a car I think was a star, but Ford saw fit to call it the Orion, which is of course a constellation. Anyway, Ford Orion, James, banger or
Yeah.
classic?
It's an interesting car. Obviously, it's an Escort with a boot. And if you go to countries around Europe, you could sometimes end up in that as a taxi. Actually, I remember being in Turkey many years ago, and I was in a Ford Orion taxi cab, which was good. I also bought one a few years ago. Strangely enough, I've been looking through some old stuff that I did, and I actually went to Northern Ireland in the early 90s. And bought one for a TV program. It was actually it formed a series. It was on Ulster TV where I went and bought a car. I looked around the car market in full on troubles Ulster as helicopters hovered overhead and went through checkpoints and all sorts of exciting things like that. And yeah, ended up buying one for 500 quid, which was not a half bad car. And the most worrying thing was after I left Northern Ireland, they actually took it to a garage and had it checked out. And as you know, the MOT in Northern Ireland is rather different to over here. They're government-run places, and actually they're a tiny bit more on the ball. But they gave it a clean bill of health, so actually did okay with that one. So I quite like it. Again, it's one of those cars, as we always say on the Bangers and Classics, that you just do not see at all. You see them everywhere, and now they're nowhere. And it's definitely a banger. And I'm not quite sure whether it would be a classic. It's a bit of a struggle. I mean, it got made in other countries for far longer than it was here. It sort of limped into the 90s a bit, I think. But they didn't really sell a lot of them because most people over here wanted hatches. But yeah, if you had a gear, maybe, which I think that was the one I might have bought actually. That's sort of on its way to a interesting classic, but it's definitely a banger. What about you,
Right.
David?
Okay, well, just go back to the MOTs from Northern Ireland. So
Yeah,
that's a good point, James. If you're doing an MOT check in a car on the government website in the UK, it will not show up Northern Ireland MOTs.
yeah,
So and they don't have an online facility in Northern Ireland, this last time I checked anyway. So if you're buying a car from Northern Ireland, you need to ask for the hard copy MOTs if you want to see the history, because I don't think you can get them any other way. It's just something to be borne in mind, because people say, oh, it hasn't got an MOT history. Well, if it's been in Northern Ireland, it won't have one online. But there we
no,
go. Anyway, back to the Orion. Well, the Orion reminds me a little bit of the Vauxhall Belmont, though I think it was a bit better looking than the Belmont.
yeah,
It was aimed, I think, at a slightly older market than the Escort. And that's borne out by the fact that there wasn't, as far as I'm aware, an XR3 version of the Orion, nor
No,
was there a turbo version.
no.
Um, and so I think the 1.6 gear, injection gear, was probably the fastest one you got
Yeah.
if you're into that sort of thing. But if you're into that sort of thing, you probably wouldn't be buying an Orion anyway. Practical car, worthy car, did what it said on the tin, took people and luggage all over the place, went to work, to the shops, that kind of thing. Nothing particularly exciting about it. Nothing particularly memorable about it. It simply was. It did this job. It did this job pretty well, in fairness. And again, it's like a lot of these cars are just disappearing. And the Orion's definitely one of them. I don't remember the last time I saw one on the road, and it wasn't so long ago, James. That they were still
Mm.
quite plentiful.
Yeah.
But is it a banger or a classic? I'm going to swither over this one. I'm going to say classic, just because there are so
Mm.
few left. As far as I know, I didn't bother to check the numbers, but just on the basis that I haven't seen one for ages, and usually see most types of car kicking around at some point or other. I'm going to assume it's very much in short supply, and I think it's kind of an unloved car. So I'm going to give it a little love by saying, yeah, it's a classic. So we can agree to differ on that one, even though you're probably right.
Oh, I don't know about that, David. I think I'm sure the listeners would disagree on that one, but there you
They probably say James is
go.
always right.
Uh,
Anyway, so having moved on from the Orion, let's do some plugging because Christmas is on the way, and James and I have some wares. I've got 4 books. The 3 of them are kind of strange books in a way. They are hybrid books. They're called quiz books, but they're not really conventional quiz books. A conventional quiz book is questions and answers. The books I've labelled as quiz books also have narrative sections at the end, which talk about the questions or the answers, give a fair bit of detail. So, for example, in one of the books, I think it's the Ultimate Classic Car Quiz Book, it asks what Hollywood star raced in the BSCC, which was the British Saloon Car Championship, before went to the BTCC. Obviously gives you the answer, but it tells you when he raced, where he raced, whose car he raced, the circumstances that led to it. That kind of information is all in there. So the books are quite a bit bigger and chunkier than the quiz book. There's lots of little nuggets of facts, stats, and trivia. The other book I'm going to plug is one called Lesser Spotted Classics. I've mentioned it before. It's joint effort with Russell Wallace, and it says there's 21 cars, and it's actually 22 because we had to squeeze another one in to actually get to the minimum size for printing. And basically, it's about 1,000 or more words about each of 22 rare cars in the UK, and Russell's drawn a bespoke image of every single car. And he's made a great job. But the images are obviously black and white because printing in colour for us would be ridiculous. We'd have to put the price to a ridiculous level, and we're not willing to do that. But here's the thing: you can colour them in, so it's definitely well worthwhile. Good stocking filler. And that's all I'm going to say on the subject because now it's time for James to get his comments in about some of his excellent books.
Well, it's very nice of you to say that, David. I can't remember all the books I've written. Maybe quite rightly so. I mean, all I would say, the Bangerpedia, although a reader pointed out there is a technical mistake in it the other day, which I'll have to rectify in future editions. It's extremely minor, but if you wear an anorak, you might spot it. But
Mm.
the Bangerpedia, it's a very long book, and it's I mean, there's nothing in it that you couldn't just do an internet search for, but it's quite nice to have it in book form. I'd certainly plug Demotorized. I wrote about the war on the motorists, which is in full swing now. When I wrote about it, I think people thought I was mad, or was going mad, or madder than I usually am. But I seem to have been proved right in that we're being forced off the road. If you want to know the detail of how we've been forced off the road, that's quite good. Bangonomics Rebooted is the original Bangonomics. World Cup Cortinas has got a new cover, and there's loads of others. There's British Car Industry, our part in its downfall, which is still quite popular with people, and German Car Industry, my part in its victory, which is all about me selling BMWs, but also about the German car industry and how it went from strength to strength. So there's lots of my nonsense.
Mm.
I would recommend that people go and watch one film. If you can buy one film that all the family would enjoy and sit round, after post turkey, because they'll be rubbish on the TV. But there's a film called What's Up Doc, and that is a fantastic family film. There's no nastiness in it. It's just funny from beginning to end. There's Barbara Streisand's in it, Ryan O'Neill, and there's a fantastic car chase in it. That's basically the last half of the film is a car chase, and it's worth watching for that. Lots of great car spots, but as I say, it's an extremely funny film, made 1972. If you've never heard of it, you'll thank me that you've now heard of it when you've watched it. But yeah, fun for all the family. So even the nippers will enjoy it, and the old people will get some of the jokes. And Barbara Streisand sings. So there you go.
Jolly good. That's a great idea about getting a film that everybody can watch.
Yeah.
I've got one as well. I tend to watch every Christmas. Yeah, it's one that came out in my youth. I never went to see it at the movies. I don't know why. I think my personality's changed somewhat from those days. I probably dismissed it as being historically inaccurate tosh and didn't embrace the actual marvelousness of it. It's a film called Escape to Victory. We've all seen it.
We have.
It's ludicrous in one level, but it's brilliant in another level. And I prefer to concentrate on the brilliant. It's got all sorts of people you wouldn't expect to find in the film. Pelé, Bobby Moore, dear old John Wark, whose only line in the film was dubbed, apparently.
Is it really?
Yeah, apparently so. Yes, John speaks English with a pronounced Glasgow accent. Great footballer, though.
Yeah, Trevor Beatty's in that as well, isn't he?
Kevin Beattie, you mean?
Kevin Beatty, sorry, yeah.
I think so, yeah. There's a lot of Ipswich players.
A lot of Ipswich, yeah.
A lot of Ipswich players. And at the time that was made, Ipswich were a blooming good football team.
Yeah, they were.
They were a terrific team. In fact, they won, was it UEFA Cup?
They did, didn't they? Yeah.
Yeah, over 2 legs. I think so. And but I digress. It's a great film to watch. It's great family entertainment. Sylvester Stallone's in it. Michael Caine. You'll love it. And on that note, let's take a break. You're listening to Bangers and Classics, the only podcast to be recommended by both Your Dishwasher Magazine and the Transylvanian Police Authority. So we're back after that break, and more mince pies have been consumed, more mulled wine. Anyway, you were saying, James, before we took a break, or when we took a break, you made a comment, and I think the listeners would like to hear that one.
Well, I was just saying, that maybe we should be in a secure institution of some description, but actually the security at Kenny's show is actually quite intense. So I think this is probably the best place for us.
Absolutely. And as you know, Kenny has his eyes and ears and everything as well.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
We couldn't exist without him.
No,
absolutely not. And I'll tell you something, another friend of the show who's been doing some things lately is young Simon. He's been colouring in some of Russell's sketches on Twitter. We put a couple of sketches out from the book I mentioned.
Yeah.
And Simon's colorised them. Made a very good job of it too, which has led to a bit of banter. So he's another one who's on the ball. I mean, maybe they should take over the podcast and we could do something else.
Well, that's right. Well, yeah, we could just take the income, the massive income we get from the podcast, and just let everybody else do it, and that'd be great.
Absolutely. I mean, we could never afford Waitrose mince pies otherwise.
No, of course not.
No. Anyway, talking about Christmas, we got a letter, as you know, a few days ago, and it's from the North Pole.
All right.
And it was from somebody called Santa Claus.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, some people might call him Father Christmas. I know that certainly my English relatives call him Father Christmas, but I always know him as Santa. Same fellow anyway. Big guy, red suit, white beard. And he says that the reindeers have gone on strike. Not quite sure what that's all about, but he needs a vehicle in order to fulfill his duties this Christmas. And he's asked us for help. Now, I wonder, James, if using your extensive library of knowledge and indeed your vast amount of contacts out there, if you've found something for him.
Well, strangely enough, before we got Santa's letter, I was actually looking into pickup trucks, because actually a pickup would be fantastic for him, wouldn't it? Because there's loads of room to sling the old presents in the back. And if you think about his sleigh is effectively a pickup, isn't it? I would say. Wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So I wasn't holding out too much hope really when I started looking around, but actually I came up with a few sort of interesting workhorses, I suppose you could call them. The first thing actually, a Toyota Hilux. Now a lot of those are sort of worn out and rubbish and on their last legs because they've been run into the ground. But I came across a 90s import one, which came over here in 2001. It's got a 2-litre petrol with an automatic gearbox, so that's definitely not builder's spec at all. And it's got turquoise paintwork, which again is certainly not builder spec, so you can be certain that it's been fairly well looked after. Mileage 66,000. It looked very, very tidy. It looked very dated, which was quite good, I thought. And it was basically a four-door crew cab with the pickup stuff at the back. And that was 3,700, which I thought was pretty
Hmm.
good going, really. That seemed quite cheap to me. I thought
Yeah.
Santa could afford that. And apart from that, now you used to be able to get a Ford P100, which was basically a Sierra, wasn't it? With a pickup body,
Yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah, that's right.
and I can't find any of those at all. The sort of slightly nearest one is a Rancho. I did come across one of those, 2002, looked quite decent condition. Had a lockable metal cover over the back, so it turns it into a van. But obviously you're separated from the back, but that's good depending on what you're carrying in the back. And that's got a 2.5 turbo diesel. Reasonable mileage again, 73,000. Seemed quite tidy, wasn't rusty, and that was £2,000. I thought that was quite good. And then finally, I obviously had to come up with a classic rather than a banger, which is a Rancho, and that was a Morris Minor, 1964 Morris Minor pickup. It looked in really good condition. It was private sale. The only downside to it is that there was no detail, and that's the one thing that you can normally rely on with a classic car advertisement, is that someone will give you probably too much detail. So I wanted too much detail, and there wasn't any. But never
Oh,
mind. It was 8,500. It looked quite tidy, but obviously I would need to know more before I bought it on behalf of Santa.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
does it have the grunt not to get around the entire globe in a night? That's the question.
I don't know. It's got an A series engine. The A series engine will go on forever, and even when it's broken, it will still keep going. So that's always
Well, that's good. Yeah, so
the only
reliability is
big
very
thing.
important.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, you were talking about Santa's sled.
Mm.
Would you say it's a roadster?
Yes, I suppose you would. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I was just wondering off the top of the head there. Well, I went down a different path. I
Oh.
figured, well, he's lost his vertical takeoff
Mm.
facility and vertical landing facility. So he's a vehicle that's going to be able to cope with all sorts of terrain. And I thought, well, he's a very classy individual. He'll
Yeah.
want something with a bit. Obviously, he is. He wants something with a bit of space for himself, and of course, his presence. And that took me back into the mists of time. And I thought AMC Eagle,
All
an
right.
AMC Eagle
Mm.
station wagon, 4-wheel drive,
Mm.
good ground clearance, automatic, so it should be able to cope with most everything. The one I found has got a 6-cylinder engine.
Yep.
It's on eBay. Its car itself looks pretty good. It's not perfect. It could do with a little bit of tidying here and there, from being
Yeah.
honest. But for goodness sake, it's an AMC Eagle, which was
Mm.
quite remarkable, and it's permanent 4-wheel drive. Or certainly the early ones, where this one might not be, but it's got 4-wheel drive, so Santa can reach anywhere. He can even get down the road where I live, which is actually has been surfaced recently. But before that, it would have taken something like an Eagle to get down there. And of course, being American, it should have that bit more space. Because let's face it, he's quite a jolly chap, and he does like a mince pie and a couple of bugs of eggnog.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it has told in his waistline. But the suspension has to be able to cope with the extra weight as well. So the one I found, to say, it's £5,500. So 1985, it
Mm.
is, I believe, and I'll just tell you, it's going to be a left-hand drive, and it
Mm.
is left-hand drive, which is fine because I believe they drive in the left at the North Pole.
Yeah, they do.
Um, it's nothing too drastic in the MOT history as far as I could see, and it's good. Cosmetically, could do a little bit of a brush up here and there, but I'm told it's very solid underneath. So if I were Santa, I would certainly think about that. So we may end up buying that from and the pickup truck. He may want to.
Well, who knows? Yeah.
I
He,
stand by. Well, that sort of money we're talking about, James. He could probably afford 2 of them.
I think he could do. Yeah. He's loaded, Santa. He's got loads of
Yeah,
money.
yeah. I mean, that might
Mm.
be us off the naughty list. Having done that
Yeah.
now.
Exactly.
Probably not. Anyway, talking about going from one list to another, something we've talked about occasionally in the past is things that you used to find in cars that you don't find anymore. I was thinking about this the other day. It beats working, let's be honest. And
Mm.
I came up with a couple of things, and one of them was headlamp wash wipe. You just
Yeah.
don't see it anymore. And I think it was a very useful thing. What do you reckon?
I think it's extremely useful. And when you mentioned it, I thought, yeah, why don't cars have headlamp wash wipes anymore? And I think if you ask the manufacturers, I don't think they could give you a credible answer. They'd probably say, well, it would, use lots of CO2 or something. That's what a modern
Yeah.
one would say, wouldn't they? Say, oh no, it'll kill the planet if you have headlamp wash wipes. But I think we
Hmm.
should start a campaign here and now, David, and you
Yeah.
should front it for especially at this time of the year, because you really should wander around your car every day and wipe your lights down, but very few people do.
Well, I was
Um,
going to think you had detritus off the road when you're driving
yeah,
along.
mm,
That's the worst thing but it's been raining or it's been snowing,
yeah,
and there's all sorts of crud left on the road that gets thrown up onto your windscreen, and of course covers your lights as well.
mm,
I'm just wondering, maybe there's a legal reason for it in terms of the actual the wiper arms being at
no,
pedestrian height. I can't think so. I don't think it
no, I
would
don't
be,
think so. I think it's all
but
rubbish. No.
yeah, that might
Um,
have been an excuse for it. The other thing I thought was just something we mentioned recently was a voltmeter.
hmm.
Cars don't seem to have them. Or ammeters anymore, rather. They seem to have gone as well, which is kind of sad because, we'd all like to know the state of charge of our battery and state of the alternator, and having a device, a gauge in the car lets us see that at a glance. I know they're not hugely reliable, they're not hugely sophisticated, but it's better than nothing. And they seem to have disappeared as well. And the other thing is sunroofs. Now, I like the sunroof. I know they leak, I know they cause problems, but the sunroof is good. And again, a great way of getting fresh air in. And in fact, an ecologically sound way. If you have just a manual sunroof, it gives you a bit of exercise too. Maybe you disagree.
Is that me, David? No.
He's fallen asleep now. You see, that's what happens.
Well,
You
no.
take him to a party and he falls asleep.
Well, strangely enough, there is something on Land Rovers which is called a safari roof, and that soaks up any heat. So I would tell everybody to fit a safari roof on their car if they're in a hot place. I always screw a safari roof onto whatever I'm driving in the summer to soak up all that heat. And actually, yeah, you could have a sunroof poking through that. I'm sure that defeats the object, but I think it'd be quite fun. I was actually thinking about sliding windows, actually, because I've got a couple of cars with sliding windows, and
Mm.
actually they're great. And yeah, that you don't need air conditioning because you can regulate your own temperature with a sliding window. They are extremely simple, and the worst thing you get is maybe some moss growing up in the gaps in between the glass. Very occasionally they might fall out. My Land Rover ones occasionally fell out until I applied some remedial work to them. But actually, it's the simplest way to have your windows open, and you've got lots of room, and it's very light. And that's why Isigonis put them into minis. And it isn't a step back. It's I would say the way forward, David.
Mm. Well, in the same vein, you might see opening quarter lights.
Yeah.
And then for younger people, I say, "What's a light? It's not a light; it's a window." They're quite useful, those things.
Mm.
Kind of like sliding windows in a way. You can regulate the airflow through them very easily, but again, you don't see those. And I'm sure there's reasons for it, and designers have. Whether or not we at Bangers and Classics would accept those reasons, well, that's a different matter. But yeah, so there's a few things out there that we think should return to cars. But the question is, James, will they?
Well, they will once our campaign starts, David. Don't worry about that.
Ah,
So it'd be interesting to know if the cars that or the car that wins, Kenny's competition has either quarter lights or headlamp wash wipes, because that would be quite
well,
interesting, wouldn't it?
well, indeed, yes. But we can't disclose the cars that are in it just now because it's not going live until 9 p.m.
Well,
But by
we
the time,
could.
well, we
Oddly
can
enough,
actually. Yeah.
oddly enough we could do, but we're not going to because morally it would be the wrong thing to do. Because actually, at the time we record this, it hasn't happened yet. But at the time this is
Mm.
broadcast, it will have happened, and all the excitement will be over. But I don't feel like I could comment on it with a good conscience.
Oh. So
Yeah.
just very quick, we'll just wrap something up with a positive note to end the show.
Mm.
Cheery classics.
Yeah.
What classic cars always put a smile on your face when you see them? One or two examples.
Very hard to come up on a Mini without smiling, without seeing. You cannot not smile without seeing a Mini. It's utterly impossible to do that, and that's what I would nominate. The most obvious one, and strangely enough, I've been looking back over some old things that I did. is the Frog Eye Sprite. The Frog Eye Sprite is obviously the cheeriest of cheery classic car faces that you could ever wish to see. It's a miracle that it ever got made like that, but it is a rather lovely little car.
Hmm.
Which immediately has a happy disposition and will put the anybody in its vicinity. I would have thought it would raise their uh, uh, um, their levels of happiness by a measurable degree. So
Hmm.
those are my two immediate
Right.
thoughts.
I would go for a Volkswagen split screen T2.
Mm,
Always make me smile. I always like the look of
mm,
those. They look very cheerful. It's almost as if they've got a face, James, when you
yeah.
think about it. With
Mm,
with the central pillar at the front, almost dividing the windscreen into eyes. That's probably having too much mulled wine again, of course.
yeah.
Um, the other one is anything like a TVR, just because they're so
Mm,
rare. The ones that are on the road nowadays tend to be really well cared for. They make a lovely noise, and the styling is great. For the most part, TVRs are good-looking cars.
yeah.
I always smile when I see one. There are lots of other cars, but those two, I think, are prime examples of a car that if I see it, I always instantly feel my mood being elevated
Mm,
by it. And oh, hang on, here comes Kenny now. And we'd better go and talk to him
yeah.
before we get shown the door. So on that note, we're going to say thank you very much for listening. We'll be back next week. Hope you will be too.
Yeah. See you then.
And perhaps by then, James might have more to report on the Caroline Munro situation.
Well, there you go. Yes, I'm ready to be dispatched at a moment's notice in my Mini Cooper to wherever she lives. It's probably in a castle. It's probably Transylvania. We'll end up going back there again, David.
Well, you better not take the Mini then. Maybe the Innocenti, you can fit the dishwasher in the back of it. Cheerio, folks.
All right. Bye bye, everybody.